financial statements. Now, the two financial statements that we will be looking at will be the statement of comprehensive income. What happens in that statement? In the statement of comprehensive income, we look at the financial result of the company, where we determine either the company has made a profit or the company has suffered a loss. Previously, it was called an income statement. Now, it is called a statement of comprehensive income. Second statement we will be looking at is the statement of financial position. What happens in that statement? There we look at the net worth or the wealth of the business. Now, grade 10s allow me to actually just recap and tell you, when we look at the statement of financial position, we are actually looking at the accounting equation. So we are looking at, first of all, we are looking at your assets, and then we are looking assets will be equal to your owner's equity plus your liabilities. Let's move on. Now, I've decided that I will show you where exactly we are at today. So if we look at the accounting cycle, first of all, we had the transaction. Then we moved on to source documents. Follow me, source documents, that's the second step. We've completed all our journals, if you can recall. The CPJ, CRJ, DJ, ma'am hasn't listed them there. From the journals, we've moved on to our ledgers. The general ledger, debtors ledger, creditors ledger. Now we're sitting at a trial balance, and remember we get different trial balances. At the moment, we will be presented, or you will be presented with a pre-adjustment trial balance. What does that imply? The trial balance before any adjustments has taken place. Then we move from our trial balance. We are currently sitting at the financial statements, which we will be discussing today. Let's move on. I have decided that it will be good practice, very, very good practice for my learners just to look again at the format of the statement of comprehensive income. What do we determine in the statement? We determine the net profit at the end of the year, or it could be that the business has suffered a loss. Very seldom that you are exposed to exercises of that nature in grade 10 or at school level. So we start out with the sales. Why sales? Sales will be the first item that appears in the nominal section. So if we look at the statement of comprehensive income, it is primarily information from the trial balance that appears in the nominal section. Recall that the trial balance has two sections, balance sheet section, and it also has the nominal section. Right, so let's look at our format. First of all, we start out with sales. Now remember, from my sales, I deduct my debtors allowances. From the, we then get a final figure and we go put it in my end column. Thereafter, we will deduct cost of sales. Grade 10, be careful, cost of sales must be deducted. Once I do that operation, remember, all of this happening over here is the trading. So this gross profit that is now generated from the trading is exclusively profit due to the fact that the business has traded. Now, apart from the gross profit, the business also has other forms of income, which we then add. Example, rent income. It could be discount received. I've got written down here commission income. Remember, it could also be fee income. There are quite a few other items, but for now, ma'am will not mention all of them because we are limited for time. We need to do an exercise. So we then add all of these income, put it in the above the block, add it to my gross profit. What is it that I come to? I come to my gross income. right? Thereafter, my grade 10s, we move to our operating expenses. Do you see that ma'am has bracketed and shown you? Please, operating expenses needs to be in brackets. Now, I have just listed but a few. Obviously, there's much more, but this gives you an idea of the expenses that can be included under operating expenses. Example, I don't see insurance here. That's another expense that can be included. What do we then do? We take all our expenses in our block, we add them, and we write the figure over there. Just allow me to add in a statement of comprehensive income, you'd find 2 or 3 rows open. Now, usually those rows would be for your items such as your trading stock deficit. You know what that is? It's a shortage of stock. When your records is more than your physical count. Depreciation, remember we've done that last time. That is depreciation on your vehicles and on your equipment. So, once we have added all our expenses, we put it in the block, above the block, put our brackets around it, and then we come to a full figure, which we then in turn deduct from our gross income. So once we've done that, we move on, we come down, and we get our operating profit. So after I have my operating profit, I move to interest income. Now, interest income will be comprised of items such as interest on fixed deposit. Also, it could be interest that you earn on your current account. So think of it, it's interest income, therefore we are going to add the interest income. By now you should know what falls under interest income. Once I've added those 2 items, I then come to what is called my profit before interest expense. The interest expense in turn grade 10s can be, or most of the time it is my interest that I pay on my loan, and it can then also be the interest that you pay on your overdraft. Can you see, ma'am has put that in brackets, and once I have deducted that from my profit before interest expense, I then end up with a net profit. So to summarize, sales minus cost of sales equals gross profit, add other income, I come to my gross income, I deduct all expenses, I end up with my operating profit, I add interest income. Once I've done that, I will then deduct my interest expense, and thereafter I'll be sitting with a net profit for the year. Now, allow me to look at exercise 7.1. We will look at the blitz a bit later. What is required of us? They want us to do the statement of comprehensive income. They've given us an answer sheet. They filled out figures for us. What's somehow different with this exercise? They haven't given you a trial balance. They have instead filled out the figures for you. So here we have all the adjustments, which we will work through one by one. And then what ma'am has referred to, there is your statement of comprehensive income with figures that has been pre-punched in for you already. So we will be working systematically through the statement of comprehensive income. Remember, we've just covered the format. So allow me in this exercise, do you see that this is the end of my financial year? Very important because it will assist us when we need to do our adjustments. It starts out with sales. It has been punched in for you. So at this point in time, grade 10s, we will be looking at our adjustments. Let's look at our first adjustment. Our first adjustment reads, so we are supposed or required to do the statement of comprehensive income. So that is what we are required to do. And then it moves a bit further to tell us, here is our information and adjustments. So we will be working systematically through all of them and then give the effect. So look at it, it starts at A and it moves down right to K. The first says that figures has been filled out for you. So let's go slow and not rush it. I read A, debtors allowances equals to 22,000. So ma'am will highlight the 22,000. Can we then go and check what impact will that 22,000 have on my sales? Do you agree that there's a figure filled out already for us? 442,000. So let's go and punch in our 22,000. What is the effect? It clearly tells us that debtors' allowances needs to be deducted from my sales. Allow me to move on, grade 10s. Now we're moving to B. My A is finished or completed. In B, they're telling us or informing us that faulty watches were returned to the supplier, and this has not been recorded. Now, if I return goods, it simply means that my stock or my trading stock will decrease. So let's look at the effect. Right. Do you recall that it says that it was an amount of 900 that was returned to the supplier and it was not recorded? That entry will primarily affect my balance sheet, which we will do a bit later. So allow me at this point in time, grade 10s, to move on to C and look at what the effect is of C. So we're moving on. Ma'am has already indicated more goods were returned and the amount was 800 Rand by a debtor. Now, why have I taken that off? It simply is another allowance. So be careful. You can have allowance that is in the trial balance as well as allowance that is in the adjustment. So we have done our calculation. The effect will be as follows. So the new amount for my sales is 419,200. We have worked up until C. What was the effect on cost of sales of when I go back to that 800 Rand? Allow me to do and show the calculation. So my sales was equal to 800 Rand. And remember, that was a return by the debtors. We've completed that. We now need to find out what is the cost of sales of that amount because it is impacted. If you go to your information, it tells you that the markup is 60%. Now, if it's 60% and I'm looking for cost of sales, by now you know I will have the 100 as my numerator, the 160 as my denominator. Multiply that by my 800 over 1, and we will come to a figure of 500 Rand. What is that 500 Rand? It is my cost of sales. So this cost of sales is intertwined and clearly it's linked to the 800 which we filled out. So if we go back to our statement, we can see that ma'am has deducted the 500 Rand cost of sales. Why? Because remember, this reduces the cost of the goods because the debtor has returned the goods now. So what is the next step? I now need to find out. Remember, ma'am said it's important to put your cost of sales in brackets. Once I've done that, so my cost of sales, I'll deduct now from my sales. Can you do the calculation? We'll come to a figure of 157,200. What is this profit? This profit is primarily profit that was generated due to trading. So, grade 10s, if we look clearly, look at all the marks that can be attained if you just fill out the top section. It's 1, 2, that mark over there, 3, it will be 4, 5, up to 6 marks just for your trading section. So go and complete, don't leave the adjustments halfway or the statements halfway. We complete up until the last column. Can we move on to the next adjustment? So we have completed C. Now, let's move on and see what's happening in the letter D. If I read D, it tells me the owner took watches for family gifts. Cost was 2,600. Now, the minute you see family or you see personal use, you know that 2,600 falls under drawings. So make a note when we move on and we're going to do our notes to the financial statements, we will be looking at the drawings. So for now, there isn't an entry at this point in time in the statement of comprehensive income. Let's move on. Now I'm going to my letter E. What's happening in E? Advertising includes 300 Rand for how many months? For 6 months, and the contract happened in March. So let's do that calculation. Right, remember my financial year. So I am sitting, so we're busy with advertising, right? And the advertising is adjustment number E. And we're going to go straight and check what the effect is. Grade 10s, what ma'am is doing, we filled out, let me just recap. We filled out all the figures for you first from the trial balance. I am working according to the adjustments. Because if we're going to jump around, we're going to cause confusion and you will not complete or get good marks in your statement of comprehensive income. So as the adjustments run, ma'am will come and I will fill out and complete till the last column. So my advertising that was paid, the amount is 300 Rand. It's clearly said and indicated that it is for 6 months. Therefore, it's evident that it is 50 Rand per month. Now, if I go back to my financial year, grade 10s, that is the point where my financial year ends. So, the mid will year be that I'm going to look at December 31st, 21. So allow me quickly just to indicate, if that is December, this will be January, February, March, April, May, and there's my June. So, Jan, Feb, March, April, May, and there's June. So, if I can recall, it was clearly indicated that it was paid in on the 1st of March. So March belongs to my year, April belongs to my year, May belongs to my year, as well as June, which tells me of that 6 months, 4 of them belongs to the year. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 belongs, 4 months belongs, and what can you tell me about the other 2? The other 2 clearly falls outside. So these 2 we now need to take out, right? So once I've done that, grade 10s, let's see how it works. If it's 50 Rand per month, the 2 months that I now need to take out will be July and it will be August. So it is 50 Rand times 2, which will give me my 100 Rand. And that is the figure that doesn't belong. So if I move on, we will see that I have indicated, if I look at my advertising, there's my advertising amount. The amount that needs to be taken off is the minus 100 Rand. Right. Allow me to move further and look at the other adjustments. The other adjustments are as follows. If indicates that depreciation for the year for furniture and fittings as well as for equipment, those are the two figures. It is 8,500 and the other figure is 3,200. So, allow me grade 10s to actually go and put in those figures. There, ma'am has indicated what those figures are. There we have our 8,500. There we have our 3,200. And together, it will give me an amount of 11,700. If we can recall, we have done the advertising of 100 taken off, and it gives me a figure of 7,790. From there, we've moved on and we've done our depreciation. Our depreciation is on vehicles and equipment, and it adds up to 11,700. Now we're moving on, and we discover that according to the bank statement, they tell us, let's first go back and first do G. At G, it tells me that the stationery valued at 720 Rand was paid but not used. What is that telling me? That stationery is on hand. Right? Now, on hand means you have not used it. So if I go to my stationery, do you see we already have a figure of 2,860 filled out there. I have not used the stationery of 720. Therefore, I will now deduct the 720. It's unused. Once I do that, remember grade 10s, we don't leave unfinished. We actually come back and we go and fill out the figure over there. So the new amount for my stationery is 2,140. So we have completed G. Allow me to move on. We are now looking at H. At H, they indicate that we received a bank statement. On that bank statement appeared the following. There was a debit order, what for? For insurance premium for June as well as for July. Now, I clearly indicated to you, grade 10s, that my year ends in the month of June, the 30th of June. So anything outside of June implies that it doesn't belong to the year. I need to take it out of the amount. So let's go and let's do that adjustment. If you can look clearly that we already have an amount for insurance of 990 written or filled out for us. What will be the next step now, grade 10s? Remember, it said and it indicated to us that the amount, so we are busy now with H. It indicated that an amount of 600 was for 2 months. Once again, I now need to understand that the 600 I now need to take and I need to divide that by 2, which tells me that the insurance is equal to 300 Rand per month. But I need to take out the month of July because it does not belong to my year. Let's do so. Right? Now, ma'am has done both entries. Let's go slow. The 600 Rand is the 600 that was paid. But recall, July does not belong to my year. Therefore, I'm taking out the 300. Let's recap. 990 was initially paid. Thereafter, you paid a 600 Rand for 2 months. The months is June as well as July. July does not belong to my year. Therefore, I will deduct the 300 Rand for July. I will then end up with a figure of 1,290. Let's repeat, 1,290. Grade 10s, if you go down, the next entry is my discount that has been allowed, right? That one, ma'am, has filled out for you because it's a relatively straightforward entry. So, if you can recall, 214 was the amount that has been punched in for you. If we go back to our adjustments, which we're currently busy with, we will see that a debtor paid his debt of 400 Rand. So that's his debt. But in full, he only gave us a 380 cash. Now, nowadays, I said cash, but remember, EFT is the way to go. So, if you take the 400 which he or she owed, and he or she is settling the debt with only a 380, it simply tells us that the difference between the two will be a 20 Rand discount that we have allowed. Therefore, that 20 Rand will now increase, as I said, my discount. So it's 214 plus the 20, and I will end up with a figure of 234 Rand for my discount. Right. Grade 10s. Can you see that all my figures has been filled out now for my expenses? Except the sundry expenses. If we look at our information, it tells us that the sundry expenses is the missing figure. So how are we going to go about to get and to figure out how we're going to reach that amount that needs to be entered in there? Allow me to quickly go back from the top and recap, and then we'll come back. So up until this point, we filled out all our adjustment to the point of depreciation. We've earned quite a few marks. Allow me to go back. We've got our sales. I'm not going through the detail again. What have I done after that? I have then deducted my cost of sales. I came to my gross profit. After my gross profit, I had various income that I've added. After my gross profit, I've added these two sets of income. What are they? The fee income and the discount received. Now, discount received, can you see we filled that in straight away? Why? There was no adjustment. Let's come to fee income. Allow me to go back to our information C. If we go back to our information C grade 10s, it indicates that there was another 50 Rand that was allowed for repairs to an old watch, and the customer was not satisfied. Therefore, that will be now an amount of 50 Rand that I need to take off my fee income. So I've done that for you. It's relatively simple. So I had 11,700. I've taken off the 50. My new fee income amount is 11,650. Discount received 1,850. These two amounts added gives me a figure of 13,500. I then take my gross profit, I add my operating income. These two figures will give me an amount of 170,700. What is that all about? That is now my gross income. Grade 10s, because there is a missing figure, Another approach now needs to be followed to get what my operating expenses are. And if you look at the information given to us at the letter K, they clearly telling us that operating expenses is equal to 27% of my sales. Now, go back and check what is the amount of my sales. My sales is 419,200. I'm going to put that over 1, multiply that with 27 over 100, and I will come to a figure of 113,184. What will this figure be now? This figure is now my operating expenses, which I need the figure to complete sundry expenses missing amount. Therefore, the other option is you could also have started from the bottom, but still we need that figure. So ma'am has filled out figures for you starting at the bottom. Net profit was filled out for you. Interest expense they've also done. Then that information appears by I. So interest expense is always deducted. Grade 10s, get into the swing of working from bottom up. So before I'm going to go to my operating expenses, we're going to work bottom up. 51,810 was filled out for you for your net profit. Then my interest expense, which appears by I, is 6,785,000. What do I do with these two figures? I actually add them. If we work bottom up, we actually do the opposite. So if I add these two figures, I come to an amount of 58,595 rand. Now, ma'am has filled out this part. Why? It's easy. It doesn't require much calculations. But remember, our prime point at this stage is we need to find out what is my operating expenses, which we have done already. Ma'am has shown you that calculation, right? Let's go and do that calculation. It's filled out for us. The amount, as we've shown, remember, let's go back quickly. We've got 419,200 over 1, multiplied by the 27%. My operating expenses is now 113,184. So we've filled that figure, we filled in for you. What's the next step? These two figures from each other gives me my operating profit of 57,516. But our aim at this point in time, before we even go there, we need to find out what is the amount of sundry expenses. What grade 10s, what will the procedure be? Allow me to do the following. My operating expenses currently adds up to an amount of 113,184. That's my operating expenses in total. We have a missing figure, and that missing figure is my sundry expenses. Right. What will I do at this point in time to get what my sundry expenses are? The procedure is as follows. From the 13,980, which is my consumable stores, up until the 11,700. I'm going to give you a minute or two. Can you add all those figures for ma'am. From the 13,980, the 58,300, all of them right down up until the 11,700. Give you a minute. Check what amount grade 10s you will be coming to. Right? I'm allowing you a minute to do a calculation. Some of you are quite fast with your calculators, eh? So, can we proceed? All of those figures, all of your expenses should add up. So I will say all my other expenses adds up to a total of 95,434 rand. So I will deduct those two from each other, and you should come to the figure for sundry expenses, because that was my missing figure. Grade 10s, if you do that deduction, your sundry expenses should come to an amount of 17,750 rand. I hope at this point in time you have managed to come to those figures. Let's recap. From my 13,980 up until my 11,700, if I add all of them, I come to a figure of 95,434. What do? The 95,434 I now deduct from my operating expenses. That in turn will give me my 17,750. Grade 10s, please, it's important to show your calculations. It is important for you to, if ma'am says show calculations, don't just put a final figure in there. Show how you came to your totals in the end column. Let's recap. What have we done? We started out with our sales. We have taken off my debtors allowances. There was one in the trial balance, and there was one in both. Actually, at this point in time, both was in the adjustments. But normally, we find that in the trial balance. Then I've deducted my cost of sales. How was cost of sales impacted? With the 500 return. After I've deducted, I've come to my gross profit. What have we then done after we've done our gross profit? We've looked at our income. Remember, rent is a favorite to be over here. For this exercise, there was no rent. I've added these two figures. I came to a total of 13,500. The next step was the 157,200 and the 13,500. Those two figures I add, and I come to an amount of 170,700. All these adjustments we've done, and all these amounts have changed. Ma'am is not going through them at this point in time. I will be repeating. What was the situation, or what was the scenario over here? The sundry expenses was missing. I then calculated my operating expenses by using my 27% of my sales. I came to a figure of 113,184. Then the next step was I've added literally all my expenses up until my depreciation of 11,700. I came to a figure of 95,484. I've deducted that, and that gave me the missing figure of 17,750. The next step, these two figures, which is my gross income and my operating expenses, I deduct from each other to come to my operating profit of 57,500. 516. Now, what has happened, grade 10s, if you see, I've got a figure of 57,516. If we move down and we look at our profit before interest expense, I have a figure of 58,595. So if I take my operating profit from my profit before interest expense, I then end up with an interest income figure of 1,079. So, because this is also a missing figure, you can now go back and add the difference of 579 to your interest income. So recap, I've ended up with operating profit. I have an amount for profit before interest expense. These two from each other gives me the missing figure. So what was somehow different to this exercise? We had a missing figure for sundry expenses as well as a missing figure for my interest income. So you do that calculation there. So you add 579 and then my figure here will be 1,079. Grade 10s, let's move on. My interest expense, which was given to us, 6,785, and then in turn, the net profit of 51,810 was also then punched in for us. So, it's important to follow format. It's important to follow your adjustments, but before you move to your adjustments, you first go and fill in all the figures from your trial balance. Right, let's move on and let's look at the notes that's required. Now, I have decided that I'm going to indicate to my grade 10s what the notes are and where they belong. The notes to the financial statement, we have not managed to come to the statement of financial position, but we can at least move and check what notes fall under each of them. My statement of comprehensive income has two notes. That's interest income, that's note number 1, and it's interest expense. My statement of financial position has the following notes under that statement. First one, we call it fixed or tangible assets. That's note number 3. Inventories, which we will have time to complete now for the exercise. Trade and other receivables. By now, grade 10s, you should know where the various notes fall. Very important. You need to understand and know what falls under every note. Number 6, cash and cash equivalents. Number 7, owner's equity. And my number 8 will be trade and other payables. For our exercise, they were very, very clear that we only needed to complete the inventories, the trade and other receivables, and then they wanted us to do the owner's equity. So, ma'am will be covering those notes which was required of us. Now, these notes, as ma'am said, form part of my statement. The inventories one forms part of my statement of financial position. What has been filled out for us? Grade 10s, the trading stock, which is a balance sheet item, has an amount of 231,700. Now, ma'am has actually gone and filled out for you consumable stores on hand. Do you recall? I'm actually going to go back to my adjustments. Do you recall that we had, by G, we had an amount for stationery on hand of 750. 20. So I've decided that I'm going to fill that in directly for you. It is an easy mark. Why does it form part of my inventories? This is simply stationery that has been purchased but not used. You then classify this now as an asset. Okay? Why have I done that? It's relatively simple to fill that out. Now we're going to go to the bit more intricate. So, my trading stock balance has already been filled out for us. Now, if you can recall very clear, we have done adjustments that impact my trading stock. The first one will be, do you recall that 900 was returned as ma'am has indicated for you? The 900 by B was returned. So that 900, if you can recall, ma'am said it will affect, I said balance sheet, but it's actually called the statement of financial position. So this 900 must now be deducted from my trading stock. The next item that affects my trading stock is, do you recall, and I'm not going to go back, that we had a 500 cost of sales calculation for the goods that was returned of 800 Rand. Why am I adding the 500 Rand? The stock came back into the business. Any stock that's returned and it is in good condition surely can be sold. So let's recap. 231,700, what is that? That is the stock that's currently in the trial balance. What is the 900? Stock that was returned in the adjustment number B. What is the 500? The 500 is the goods that was returned by a dissatisfied debtor. Now, if you can recall, by D, ma'am indicated to you that the owner took watches for his family for gifts. And I told you that will be drawings, so it will affect drawings later, but it will also affect the stock. Therefore, the 2,600 for the drawings taken by the owner will now affect the stock. The new amount for my trading stock is now 228,700. What happened over here? These are all adjustments that now changes the original figure that was in my pre-adjustment trial balance. Remember, ma'am explained the 720 already. This is now also an asset. So my trading stock is standing on 228,700. My consumable stores, which is my stationery, is on 720. What will happen now? I now have a figure of 229,450. What will happen with this figure now? This is the figure that will be entered in my statement of financial position. Right? As we at this point in time, ma'am is just going to concentrate on the notes, but these notes grade 10 is imperative. And you need to find out, as you move along in your exercises, you find out a strategy that will assist you. And the strategy that I can suggest is know the details of all your notes. Then it's easier to go and fetch and go and collect the information from the question paper. So, 229,420 will be the amount that's going to go to my statement of financial position. The next note that was required was trade and other receivables. Now, trade and other receivables, immediately you must think of the customers that owe you money. So we will start out with trade debtors. At this point in time, they have not indicated what the provision is for bad debts. Therefore, we will move on and just use the information as appears in our exercise. Right. The trade debtors is punched in for you. Usually, when we have my trade debtors, I deduct my provision for bad debts and then I have my net trade debtors. In this case, there wasn't. Ma'am has gone, in your case, these two items has not been entered in for you. So it's usually my prepaid expenses that's added to my net trade debtors and my accrued income. So if I go back to my adjustments, how was my trade debtors impacted? You are intelligent and smart enough to remember that my debtors returned the 800 Rand right at the beginning there by my sales. So I must now deduct the 800 Rand because the debtor no longer owes me that money. The 800 is in this figure. What was next? Do you recall the 50 Rand that was also returned for the fee income? Then we move on. Now I see a 380. Do you recall that if I go to H and I go to the last bullet, remember my debtor paid me. So that is a payment by a debtor. It will also decrease my debtors. Having done all of that, let's summarize. My debtors owe me 14,350. My debtors have returned 800. It will decrease. This was for the repairs that the customer wasn't satisfied with. So that is also an amount that must be decreased. And the 380 is what my debtor paid. What is the 20 Rand all about? The 20 Rand is that discount that I have allowed between the 400 Rand, remember, and the 380. The amount that my debtors now owe me, the new amount is 13,100. Grade 10s, we have completed quite a few adjustments. Right. Do you agree that the advertising of 100 Rand was paid ahead for those 2 months? And I now need to add that advertising amount and slot it in under prepaid expenses. What or which other expense was prepaid? Remember that 300 for my insurance. So, if I add the two prepaid expenses, the full total will be 400. Let ma'am recap. What is this 100 all about? It is the advertising that was paid for the month, for 2 months in advance. That was for the month of July and the month of August. What is the insurance all about? The 300 that I've paid for the month of July. It doesn't belong to my year. So my prepaid expenses add up to 400 Rand. Now, do you recall that the interest on my fixed deposit or my interest income has not been paid in full? So the amount, so interest on fixed deposit, the amount grade 10s is 579 Rand. So all of these form part of parties, clients who owe me money. It is called trade and other receivables. And the total that will be going to my statement of financial position is 14,079. We have managed to complete 2 notes in full. We have also managed to complete the statement of the statement of comprehensive income. We have not managed to get to the statement of financial position. So we have covered 2 of the notes. So let's summarize. We started out by saying that we're covering 2 financial statements. It forms part of, what does it form part of? The accounting cycle. So in those statements, the first one we determine what is my profit or did the business suffer a loss. What is that statement called? Statement of comprehensive income. In this case, we had a profit. We also did not have managed to get to the statement of financial position, but in that statement, we determined the net worth or the net wealth of the business. Grade 10s, at this point in time, ma'am would want you to go and complete the other notes. There's also an exercise 7.2, which is a full statement of financial position. And then you should have the work covered that is required for you to complete the financial statements. Remember, the more we work, the more exercise we do, the better and the more guaranteed we are of success. It has been a great, great pleasure working with you. I hope everything of the best for your grade 10 here. Every bit of success, excellent results, and I know that you are studious, hardworking, diligent learners, and you will attain your level 7s in the subject. Goodbye for now.